Welcome to Battle for Atlantis here in Nassau in the Bahamas, alongside of Trevor Andershock. I'm Jeff Rabjohns, and obviously an incredibly disappointing performance by the Indiana basketball team in its Battle for Atlantis opener against Louisville. According to the StatHead data, the largest loss for a ranked Indiana basketball team against an unranked opponent in 70 years, and the second largest loss ever for a ranked Indiana basketball team against an unranked team. So that's what needs to be discussed. It was a dreadful performance by Indiana. Lots of things were not good for the Hoosiers. And the final margin, while it was significant, it was a 38-point game, 38-point margin with 7 minutes and 8 seconds to play before Louisville coach Pat Kelsey started subbing very, very deeply into his bench, going to, I believe he played 13 players, including a walk-on or two. So, Trevor, I guess let's start with, what were things that you looked at that you thought were maybe among the big contributors to why this game got so out of hand and why Indiana got just completely dominated in this one?
Yeah, I mentioned it on the Peegs.com instant analysis, but Indiana starts off the game by, throwing a pick six, basically. Oumar Ballow's pass got intercepted by Chucky Hepburn. He takes it to the other end, gets the uncontested layup, and that was kind of a sign of things to come. Louisville was the more aggressive team. They executed better right from the jump. They seemed like they were ready to go, and IU wasn't. And then, Indiana cuts it to 6 to start the second half. Looks like the Hoosiers might get back into it. And then Louisville punches them right back and opens it up to 16 plus in a matter of moments. And then it was never a game from there. So I think just Louisville's ability to really jump on Indiana early, and then IU really never having that counter punch to get back and make it a competitive game in the second half.
Yeah, a few other things. Obviously, Indiana went with, they were trying to work some high-low, a lot of high-low, really, with Oumar Ballow and Malik Ornu. And, that got them, production at times, but those two accounted for, I believe it was 24 of Indiana's first 29 points. That's good for your two bigs. It's a problem in today's basketball when you're only getting 5 points well into a game from the rest of your team, all your guards and wings. Kenyon Carlisle really struggled. Miles Rice really struggled. Indiana's starting backcourt had 0 points well into the second half. That's a problem. Louisville made 10 threes in the game, but probably more notable, they made 10 threes in the first 27 minutes of the game. And by the time they got completely up 26, 28, 30, when it was completely out of hand, they just kind of quit hitting threes. It's the 29th time in the Mike Woodson era where a team has made 10 or more threes. Not that that's a monster number in today's game. The problem is, like you mentioned before on the Peegs.com boards, Indiana doesn't really counterpunch from three. The difference in scoring from three at one point was 30-9 when the game was completely out of hand. How significant did you think that differential was in this specific game?
Like you said, especially early, that was a huge part. You let Smith, the lefty, hit a couple early threes. When you're coming into the game knowing that is the one Louisville guy that cannot get open looks. He's a three-point specialist. He's not going to hurt you off the dribble, but he is a fantastic outside shooter. You have to take away his space. Indiana gives him 3 open looks from deep early on. He hits 2 of them, and like you said, those early threes really built the confidence for Louisville, and they just kept rolling from there. I think they were 7 of their first 15 from deep, and that was monstrous. Even with IU, I think they started 3 of 5. They just couldn't keep the pace. You're not getting the volume that Louisville was. And you throw in the factor that Louisville also had 30 points off turnovers.
Right.
I think those are the big 2 keys to the game. The differential from three-point lane, and then Louisville taking advantage of their ability to turn IU over. IU, I believe, forced 15 turnovers from Louisville, but they weren't able to get out in transition and capitalize on it like Louisville was.
Yeah. Indiana finished with, I believe it was 23 turnovers on the official stat sheet. Indiana had 15. Obviously, 23 turnovers is a problem in college basketball. But when you get 15, that's not an enormous margin. The problem, like you said, was Louisville did something with Indiana's turnovers, and Indiana did very little. Yeah, those were the big things. Indiana actually did fairly well in offensive rebounding, especially early on. They were able to get some points, but or get some offensive rebounds. But the problem was, that they're not able to really do much with it as far as like, scoring. It wasn't like second chance points was an area where Indiana was dominating. Indiana really, for the most part, got dominated in about every area where you could get dominated in a game.
That's a pretty good way to summarize the whole game right there.
Yeah, perhaps we should have started there. But anyway, it was certainly it's a historic level loss when you're talking about the biggest, margin of defeat in 70 years for a ranked Indiana team against an unranked Indiana team. Now Indiana has to try to find a way to bounce back very quickly because West Virginia came up with a big upset of its own, knocked off number 3 Gonzaga. So in the second round in the losers bracket, Indiana is going to face number 3 Gonzaga, and I would guess a fairly ornery Gonzaga team. Quick thoughts, just as we look ahead to IU's second game here in the Bahamas.
My biggest thing is Indiana did not handle Louisville's pressure today, on-ball pressure. Gonzaga is going to take that to a different level. They were able to shut down Baylor's guards, who are, top-tier guards in that opener, and really dismantled them. IU is going to face that type of pressure. Are they going to be able to bounce back, be better, execute better, make better passes, take care of the ball when they get in traffic? If they don't do that, you're looking at another 30-point victory from Gonzaga tomorrow. So, like you said, quick turnaround. You don't have much time to dwell on it. I think that's probably the good thing. If you can just bounce back and be competitive, things will be, at least halfway close at some point tomorrow.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if Indiana could pull an upset, that would be, pretty miraculous, and that would sort of change the entire storyline of their trip here to battle for Atlantis and the Bahamas. But I think they got to be competitive. Fans are starting to get incredibly frustrated, especially with Indiana's inability to be competitive against some of the top teams that they've played, whether you're talking about Auburn, Kansas. I know they stayed within 20 when they played Arizona, but that was not really a competitive event down the stretch. So, fans are getting frustrated, and they want to see a team that claims its goal is Big Ten championships and national championship to compete on the national level against teams who clearly are functioning at that level. So tomorrow, certainly a meaningful game for Indiana. But that'll wrap it up for us.
Easy for you to say.
Been a long day. Wrap it up for us here from the Atlantis Resort here in Nassau in the Bahamas. For Trevor Andershock, I'm Jeff Rabjohns for Peegs.com.